world in his hands.
And maybe share your faith with them. And, it kind of reminds me of, who was that guy? Michael Drossman, maybe? The guy that first rolled out the Bible code books.
That's it. Yep.
With the,
I think it appeals to our pride here. It's kind of, I call it a form of Christian Gnosticism, the Bible code, the
sure.
Gospel of the Stars, and other things. It's this basic thing that I've kind of figured all of this out, and I've got this secret knowledge. One of the elements of Gnosticism was secret knowledge that took you to a higher spiritual plane, and it does appeal to the pride. And it's hard for people to accept, but I understand this, and I think that people, they get prideful by finding out this secret knowledge that they can then share with other people, and they too can become initiated. And that's a danger I see all over the place. Flat Earth is another one. I see people really getting on fire over that because this is some sort of special secret knowledge that nobody else seems to know about. So that's a strong appeal for a lot of people. I don't quite understand it, but I recognize it when I see it.
So that little clip was from an interview between Danny Faulkner and the podcast host, Mike Boehm. And I featured a clip from an interview that Boehm did many months ago with Dr. Lyle. And so this is with the creation astronomer, Dr. Danny Faulkner. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't just a little bit appalled and offended by the accusation that flat earthers are guilty of a form of Christian Gnosticism. Yikes. But I think it's worth talking about because I think it's something that many of us will undoubtedly encounter in one form or another. It's actually a kind of a pretty common accusation. And I hate to say it, but ultimately what it really is an ad hominem argument, basically accusing flat earthers of having some sort of psychological need to feel special, to have some sort of knowledge that no one else has, right? Which is a rather peculiar accusation. If the flat earth movement and the flat earth community is fervently trying to tell everyone about this quote-unquote special knowledge, well, then that doesn't really bolster your argument very well if it's something that it's all out there in the open. Anyways, but this claim really falls apart very quickly once you're able to pull back and put the discussion in the full context of history overall and not just frame the argument within the context of the present day. And that's essentially what it does, because it's based on the assumption that everything that the world as a whole knows now is obvious scientific truth, which again is a very ironic position to be held by somebody who is in creation ministry, where you're battling against atheism and evolution. And that's really, of course, what is at the core of this whole debate. Where is the line between true valid science and evolutionary pseudoscience really drawn? And for someone like Danny Faulkner, whose entire career has been built around asserting that Copernican astronomy and biblical literalism are not at odds with each other, there's probably few people on Earth right now who would be more opposed to the idea that the world is flat and stationary than someone like that. Same thing with Dr. Lyle. And apparently Mike Boehm, I don't know if you'll ever get a chance to listen to this, Boehm. Apparently you did see my video that I did on Dr. Lyle, and your assessment of that was that it was just an ad hominem attack against Lyle, which I'm sorry is just not the case. It was not an attack against his character. It was not an attack against his motives or his intent. The whole purpose of that video, the Excuse Me Dr. Lyle video, was pointing out the elephant in the room, that is the massive conflict of interest going on. The idea that to respond to something like the flat earth by turning to the quote-unquote expert whose entire career is built around the assumption that the Copernican universe is indisputable scientific fact is kind of a non sequitur, in my opinion. So no, I'm not saying he's a liar. Yes, the astronauts are liars. That's a different story. But no, guys like Faulkner and Lyle, yeah, here we're just talking about intellectual pride, aren't we? And that's just sort of the whole painful irony of having flat earthers being accused of Gnosticism. When, like I said, if we're able to step back and look at the entire scope of human history, how much of that history has really known all the things that we supposedly know about space and orbits and gravitational theory and relativity, things like binary star systems, which is Faulkner's forte. Has this just been general knowledge that everyone can go out and test for themselves? And you tell me, which one is the Gnosticism? Which one is the special privileged knowledge? Which one do you need PhDs to supposedly understand and study? You don't need PhDs to go out and do a curvature test and see that water does not bend at 8 inches per mile squared. An elementary student can understand those tests and perform them and interpret the data. But that's what so much of this is about. It's about the interpretation of data. And the refusal to believe that, what you spent so many years studying and teaching and believing was all about a preconceived filter of the data. You look up through your telescope and you look through all these images provided by Hubble and various probes and satellites that really all you got to work with is this tiny piece of data, and then you extrapolate this whole universe out of it. Just like the evolutionary paleontologist, looks at a few layers of dirt and he extrapolates all these Paleolithic ages out of it. And it's not true science because they're projecting their preconceived cosmological assumptions upon what they're looking at. And it's the same thing with astronomy. So I don't know what else to say, but just how that feels like such a desperate pot shot. Who's the one making ad hominem attacks? And who are the ones claiming to have some kind of privileged knowledge? I'm not. Anyone can go out and see that the earth is flat. And more people are all the time. Just yesterday I was speaking to a professional surveyor of 20 years experience, telling me about how he's been looking into this for a year and using his professional surveying equipment, where they can measure things up to like thousandths of an inch from miles away. Very high levels of zoom and able to make sure that their equipment is perfectly level. And it's extremely, extremely precise equipment. And he's saying he's telling me there's no curve. No, there's no curve anywhere. It's not there. And while the equipment he's using is pretty advanced, the concept of what he's testing is not. We're talking like basic geometry here. A straight line is about the most basic geometric concept there is, other than a point. So why are we appealing to PhDs? Why are we appealing to worldly educational institutions and thinking that is the apologetic approach that is represented in the Bible? I'm just going to close by reading out of 1 Corinthians here. And yes, this is NIV for those of you who are KJV only, but I would contend that the meaning is not lost simply because it's not KJV. Please don't idolize any one particular translation. Anyways, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise. The intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate. Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Jews demand miraculous signs and Greeks look for wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength. Brothers, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. So you tell me which cosmological perspective claims to be wise by human standards of the age that we live in. You tell me which one actually claims to have more of it figured out. Astrophysics claims to know how everything works and break it all down down to the quantum level now. I don't pretend to know what the sun, moon, and stars are anymore. I don't know how it all works. But I know that God's word is true. I know that Jesus is who he says he is. I know that this world and the kingdoms that are of this world are coming to nothing, and that heaven and earth will pass away, and everything will be made new. I know that Jesus died and rose again. I know that he is the living word. That's not Gnosticism. That's the simple beauty of the gospel that even a little tiny child can understand.